Okay, in preparation for installing new clutch plates, the first thing I had to do was drain the oil, and over here was a filter. This is an 07 Nomad, and put a new filter in, and the drain plug is right there. And then I also pull the screen out, which is something that is recommended to do every time you change the oil. And here is the screen right here. So the next thing I'm going to do now is put this screen back in, and the closed end goes into the plug. And then I'll go ahead and get that installed, and then I'll be ready to go to the next step. Okay, got the screen put back in. Wipe that off. Oh, looks like we're good to go there. Got the drain plug tight and the filter tight. So now we're ready to put some support underneath the frame, because we have to remove part of the frame on the opposite side. Okay, the next thing we have to do is to remove the heat shields from around the exhaust system, and I'll show the first one here on this back. Let's remove this first one, and there's two clamps on this one here. The other ones are similar. Loosen this bottom one here, and then loosen this top one. And on most of these, the clamp, you'd slide it up in order to loosen it from the tab behind, and we'll get that clamp slid up a little bit, and then we'll see that the pipe will come loose. I'll lift this one off, and you can see the tabs behind. There's one tab on this particular heat shield at the top. The clamp goes up behind that, and another one at the bottom, and then the other ones too are simple, similar to that, and I'll remove those. Okay, the next thing we've got to do is get ready to take the down tube off, which is this black part of the frame right here. And in order to do that, we have to take the mounting assembly for the footrest off. But before they let us go that far, it tells us to support the rear of the frame. So I've done that with a car jack across here. And then after we get a few more parts off, we'll have to put a jack up on the front, which I've already got that in place in preparation for that step. Oh, that's a little bit ahead of the game, but that should be all right. So I've already loosened the two bolts, this one here and the one here, and then they also say to take the strap loose here for this wire harness. So I had that loose a little bit ago, and I must have pushed it back on again. I'll get that pried off and get the wire out of there, because that comes with this down tube when we take that off. So now I'll go ahead and take out these two bolts, and see what's involved here in getting this off. And then also they say in the service manual to support the pad assembly, the foot pad assembly here, so that it doesn't put pressure on this brake line right here. So I'm going to turn the camera off and see if I can figure out how to get that secured. There, I've got this right side floorboard tied up here, and you can see I've got the brake line supported here. This down tube, this is part of the down tube that's going to come off so that we can get this right side cover off. And I may have to move this in order to get that right side cover off after the exhaust is removed and the down tube is taken off. So now we're going to have to get ready to take this exhaust pipe off, which should involve removing these two bolts up here, and then I'll have to look at the instructions to see. There's a clamp also I can see back at the back there that has to be taken loose. Okay, I've got the mounting bolts loose for this part of the exhaust pipe. You can see that's loose, just hanging there, and then I got the one loose down here in the back, and that's pretty loose now. There we go. So now we have everything exposed on this side, I think, that we need to. And I'm going to check my directions, but I believe that we're going to be taking these two bolts out here, and probably these two behind these caps up here, and this whole black pipe all the way down this side here will come off, which they say is necessary to, I can't even get to these bottom two bolts down here on the side cover. And that whole black thing they call in the book the down tube. Okay, I've made a little bit of progress here. We've got the bolts loose that need to be done to remove the down tube. These two right here, you can get on those with a traditional Allen wrench and with the use of a breaker bar. These are pretty tough to get loose. Also, you have to loosen these two mounting bolts here, but you can't get to those until you remove the reservoir for the foot brake. And they don't tell that about in the climber service manual, but you pull this bolt out here and remove the reservoir. That lets you get the right floorboard farther away also. Then you can loosen these two bolts. These two back bolts back here, I could get on them with a traditional Allen wrench, but I couldn't get enough torque on them, so I had to go get a socket Allen wrench and then my breaker bar, and that worked really good. The instruction manual says to loosen but not remove these until you've got them all loosened. Also, if I didn't mention it earlier, this brake line hose has to be taken off of two clamps. There's one clamp on the back side here and one clamp on the back side here. You just push it. This one you push down, on the back one you lift up to get the hose off. So I'll go ahead and pause the video and remove those 6 bolts, and then pull this down tube off, and then we'll see what that looks like. Okay, we've got the down tube off, and that's kind of what it looks like, all exposed. One thing I didn't mention on these upper 2 bolts, I discovered those holes are not threaded. There's nuts on the back side, so when you take those loose, you're going to have to put a wrench on the back side and hold the nut till we get those completely loose. Other than that, it comes out pretty clean. Also, the service manual recommended that they said that the bolts, as you pull those mini bolts out, they're not all the same length, and they do need to go back in the same holes. So they said to make a pattern, and I traced this pattern. This is the cardboard that the replacement gasket came on in a bubble wrap or a shrink wrap, and so after I got the shrink wrap off, I just traced around it with a felt tip pen and made the holes there, and as I remove the bolts, and I'll put them in the appropriate slots. Okay, got the cover off. And the service manual cautions the reader about pulling this cover off, and that there's a washer here. I forget the name of it now. They say to account for this washer and then put it back on this shaft. And sure enough, when I pulled it off, the washer was laying down below down there. So it's a good thing that I had read that note. But that's what it looks like with the opened up. There was a little bit of oil that drained out, so you might want to have some shop cloths down or a piece of cardboard like I have here in case anything like that. And of course here is the compartment that we'll go into next and remove the and replace the pressure plates in here and the drive plates as well. So I'm going to take that apart and just R&R, take those out and put in new drive plates and driven plates. Okay, this audio is being dubbed in later, and the next thing we're going to do is to remove the operating plate and the large silver center part here. And in order to do that, we have to remove the retainer, which is a flat steel ring. There's a slot that steel ring sits in, and there's a notch that you can get your flat blade screwdriver in behind and pry that retainer ring out. And it actually comes out pretty simple. Push in on the operating plate and then go in through that slot, get your screwdriver back behind that, and once it starts to pry out, you can slide the screwdriver down along behind that retainer flat steel ring, and that actually comes out pretty easy. So once you get that out, you can just go ahead and set that aside, and then the operating plate itself just comes straight out. That's all there is to that, and lay that down. And the next thing to do then is to take out the push piece, and along with that comes out the thrust washer and needle bearing, which is mounted on the thrust piece. That's just like a short rod. So go ahead and pull those out, and you can just kind of keep those all together in the same order. Set those down, those will go back in just exactly like they come out. The service manual talks about putting having a holding gear in this area right here. Obviously there's no gear there. I was mistaken in thinking that engaging the clutch or the transmission on the motorcycle would take care of that. It did not. As you can see here, that rotates. The clutch housing right here rotates even with the transmission engaged. So what a fellow has to do is provide an additional small gear, which I have right here, and I'll show you in a moment where I got this from. By inserting that gear up in here and then turning the clutch housing, you turn it just a little bit, that wedges that small gear that you have to come up with from your junk pile or wherever. And now the clutch housing won't turn. However, even with that wedged in there, when you turn the clutch housing, when you turn the nut that you're trying to take off, the clutch housing doesn't turn, but the inner clutch, if you can see this inner clutch here, the inner clutch housing does turn, so the nut doesn't come off. So what's happening here is that the clutch is actually slipping. As you look at this, these dark tabs right here are the plates with the pads that are connected to the rear wheels, and they're connected to the clutch housing by inserted in these grooves. The outer plate here is actually connected to the steel plates, and those are rotating. They're in between each of these dark brown plates. The one thing I was right about is I did not have the correct size socket, so I had to go to the hardware store and get a 27 millimeter socket. The service manual does not tell you what size that nut is. It's 27 millimeters. The other thing that I discovered is that since this housing rotates, even though I have the gear down here installed, locking the clutch housing in place, I went back to my older service manual I had on an '02 Kawasaki Nomad, and that service manual was by Kawasaki, and it specifically stated to take this nut off with an air impact wrench. So that's what I'm going to try this time. In trying to find that gear that I needed, I actually got that off of some junk I have laying around here. This red thing is the housing for Toro lawnmower, and this was the drive wheel and the rear wheel, so I got lucky and found that gear out here. Okay, the next thing we're going to do now is use the air impact wrench and take off the clutch nut. And I start off by setting my impact wrench to the middle of 3 settings with my 27 millimeter socket moved over, and I notice right away that the nut does not start to move with the socket, so I'm going to set my wrench up to the highest of 3 settings, and right away I notice that the nut starts to move. So I'll back setting back off to the middle setting now, and then just a light touch and that nut comes off all the way. One thing I noticed that there's not a lot of the bolt sticking through that this nut goes on, so it doesn't take long for it to come off. We'll go ahead and set this aside and prepare to move the next pieces. The next piece we're going to take out is the spring holder, and along with that spring holder comes the outer ring, the clutch spring, which is the largest black piece that you can see, and then there's a 3-piece back torque limiter springs. And it's important to keep all of these 3 pieces in the correct sequence and oriented in the correct direction. And I'll talk a little bit more about those back torque limiter springs when we put this thing back together, because there is an important sequence to make sure that those are in. So we'll just go ahead and set all of that aside, and then be ready to move on to the next part. Okay, now we're going to remove the clutch spring plate. This just comes straight out, and once you get that off, you'll notice there's some indentations or kind of teeth in the back. They kind of mesh up with like teeth on the clutch housing itself. So just go ahead and set that aside, and now we're ready to start removing the plates themselves that we're actually going to replace. And the first thing that we're going to remove is the driven plate. This is the one with the pressure pads on it, and then the steel plates, which is the drive plates. I'm sorry, I got those backwards. The pressure plate pads are the drive plates, and the steel plates are the driven plates. The first one to come off has an indentation that on the outer edge, it fits in a different place than all of the other plates that are just like it. So the last one you put back on will be on this in position also. So as I remove that first plate with the pressure pads on it, we'll take a look at that, and it's pretty easy to see as we inspect that it has burnt to a crisp. It's black on both sides. A new plate would have the tabs and the spaces in between the pressure pads would be shiny. This one is just scorched from both sides. And then the next thing that we'll take off will be the driven plate. This is one of the steel plates, And I'll show that, then we'll stop the video and I'll remove the rest of them. As I remove this first steel plate, I'll point to a couple of places here. We can see burn marks here, 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 and light on both sides. It's burned. Okay, I've got the whole stack out, and that's kind of what it looks like. All of the pressure plates with pads on them were burnt, and burnt real bad on both sides. No wonder that the clutch wasn't functioning properly. The steel plates all looked good except for that first one where I showed you that had the burnt spots on it, but I got both steel plates and pressure pad plates in the set that I ordered, so I'm going to replace all of those. But the rest of these steel plates, they did look okay. So I did want to show you a comparison of the one of the new pressure plates, which is in my left hand, the lower pressure plate there, and compare it with the upper one. You can see the how shiny the tabs are that's on the outer edges, and the shiny lines between the pressure pads as compared to the one in my hand on the upper right hand side is just completely black on both sides. So definitely in need of replacing those, and they're just going to work a lot better. The service manual had recommended coating the new plates with oil, so I have coated both sides of all the plates with oil here and have them suspended over my oil drain pan, letting those drip dry, and they're in the order that will go back in when I install them. The service manual said that the driven plates, which is these steel ones, are stamped during manufacturing and have one flat side and one chamfered side. Install all of the steel or driven plates with their flat side facing in the same direction, either in or out. Now, I couldn't see hardly any difference, no stamped markings, but as I noticed on one side, those teeth that are on the inner side of the ring, one edge of those teeth is kind of rounded a little bit on all of them, on, for example, on this side. And then if you flip it over and look at the teeth on the other side, the edges of the teeth are sharp in edge. So I'm going to put all these in the same direction. Okay, it's time to start putting the plates back in. And I'll take those off my rack one at a time. The first one to go in is one of the pressure plates with the pads on it. And these all go in the same indentation, the outer tabs, except for the last plate. So the second plate to go in then, of course, will be a steel plate. Remember, use the tapered edge of the teeth or any other marking you can identify as being on the same side, and then whether that's in or out, do them all the same way. And we'll just alternate now. We're back again to one of the pressure plates, and we'll just go back and forth. There's 9 of the ones with pads on it, and 8 of the ones with steel plates, I believe. And I tried to edit out the middle part of this section of the video so that I wouldn't take your time watching me alternate back and forth. It's really doing the same thing, but my GoPro editor wouldn't let me edit out the center section of the video. I could cut out the beginning or the end of any section, but couldn't cut out the middle. So this may be a good time if you wanted to fast forward through this. It's really all the same until we get down to about the last 10 or 15 seconds of this section, and the last pressure plate. The outer tabs on it are offset just a little bit from the rest of the pressure plates. One thing about using the GoPro camera, I need to figure out another way to do my audio. In some of these sections, such as this one, I had put the GoPro camera inside its weatherproof mount so that I could mount it on a tripod, and that blocked the audio going into the microphone. So in those sections, again, such as this one, I've had to come back and redub in the audio. This is the last one going in, and I'm pointing out here that the tabs on this are offset just a little bit from all the other tabs on the same plates. Here I'm missing a step. I'm starting to put together the spring holder, outer ring, clutch spring, and back torque limiters, and I'm missing a step here. Let me explain what I'm doing here. These are the back torque limiters, and they talk about coating these. There's 3 of these, and they talk about coating them with axle grease. And the first one, they're all shaped like a saucer with the outer edges tapered up. And the first one goes down against that black clutch spring with its outer edge facing away from the clutch spring. The second one goes the opposite with its outer edge down, so the outer edge of those first 2 back torque limiter springs are touching each other. And then the third one goes is reversed again and goes with this outer edges facing up away from the black clutch spring. But what the step I'm missing is on the cardboard there, just ahead of my left knee. That silver thing there is the outer is the spring is the spring holder, and that should have gone on first. That should be in place right now, so that as I get the assembly together that I've just been working on there, that goes in after that silver piece that's laying on the floor. So I messed around with this for quite a while. I put that in place, and what I'm trying to show here now is the service manual recommended using a pair of spring pliers to hold this outer ring, clutch spring, and back torque limiter assembly all together as you set it in place. And I tried to practice this with the camera off, and I couldn't keep things together using those pliers, so I just did it the old-fashioned way with my hand, and that seemed to work out really well without any issues. So remember that piece laying on the floor there should already be in place before you start setting this assembly I have in my hands now up in place. But with that other piece in place first, you go ahead and set this in place. Teeth have to mesh, as I'm pointing to there on my fingers. There's some teeth that this assembly meshes with. Get those set into place, and then you'll be good to go. Okay, I finally got my parts in the right order, and I'm ready to put the clutch nut on now. And I'm putting some anti-seize grease on the threads of the nut, and we'll get that threaded on the bolt, and then we'll be ready to torque the clutch nut in place. And I believe in the next segment of video I show moving that gear up top, but I thought I'd mention it that extra little gear that I used to take this nut off needs to be moved up top, and in order to torque this nut in place. And your manual said to just put that on finger tight. Get it snug down on finger tight. Okay, I've got the clutch nut torqued. I've replaced the push piece, the needle bearing, thrust washer, and finally the outer plate in the center. Also, I've installed the retainer, the flat steel ring that goes in that groove. And remember, there's a notch in the groove, and the point right here is to when you insert this retainer ring is to have the notch in the retainer ring offset from the notch in the operating plate just a little bit. Otherwise, the next person that might need to take that retainer out would have a little tough time getting it out. So other than that, that gets this assembly all back in place. And then the last thing I'll point out here is it's time now to clean up the edges of the outer cover and the edges of the frame, getting remaining gaskets off of right here, so we'll be ready to move. In addition to some guide pins that are on the front and rear of the housing, I've taken some 6mm extra long bolts and cut the heads off, and there's one there and another one there, and I have about 6 of those around that I'm using actually to hold the gasket in place, and those will stick through the holes in the cover long enough, farther enough for me to unscrew them when it comes time to put the appropriate bolts in. Now I'm going to go ahead and get ready to put the cover on. And notice up front here that hole that has to line up with a pin. This is where that washer was that I had to double check a couple times to make sure that it didn't get lost. And as I put this cover on, it's not real difficult, but just a little bit tricky to get that hole lined up with that shaft so that the cover will seat completely. It actually goes on pretty clean, and those extra long stud bolts that I cut the heads off of did a really good job of keeping the gasket in place as I put this cover on. And as I wiggle it in place, you'll notice that it seems to be a little bit of a struggle, not terribly bad, but there'll be one point here where you can see that front edge will kind of slip in noticeably, and it seats nice and even all the way around. Line it up just a little bit, and bump, there it goes in. So that fit really nice, and so the majority of this segment then is to go back to my template there on the floor that I traced around that gasket, and start putting the bolts in, and I'll unscrew those studs that I use to hold the gasket in place as I replace each one with the appropriate bolt. Just make sure that I get in the correct hole depending on where I've taken it out of the template. Then once I get these all put in place, then it'll be time to torque the cover down, and the service manual said to tighten the bolts hand tight in a crossing pattern, then torque them to 97 inch-pounds. And I noticed my torque wrench only went down to 10 foot-pounds, and the math told me that the 97 inch-pounds was about 8.8 foot-pounds. So I found a pretty good torque wrench at Harbor Freight for about $9 that was calibrated in inch-pounds, so that I could torque those to the proper weight. So okay, I've got the side cover torqued in place, and all the bolts are tightened, and we're ready to install the down tube, the exhaust pipe section that I removed, and the heat shields and the floorboards, and tidy things up. And we don't forget when we put this down tube in place, that we also want to snap that brake line hose on the back side in those two clips that I talked about earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and get this down tube put in place, and as you recall, that involves a total of 6 bolts, 2 at the back end back here, 2 at the upper end up here, and regardless of the nuts, have nuts on the back side, and then 2 motor mount bolts. Okay, got it all back together. As you can see, the exhaust is on. We've got oil in it. Got the right side floorboards back on again. Got the reservoir mounted up again, which had to be disconnected. Don't forget to put the wires back into the wire guides. That was part of the down tube. And then on the front here, I had to put a bolt back in, what they call a regulator in the service manual. Other than that, I think it's ready to go, and we'll take a look and see what the acid test on it's like. One thing I wanted to demonstrate here is on the clutch lever with the original plates in. When you release the clutch, nothing happened until you got almost all the way out, and about the last 1/4 of an inch of travel, the clutch would engage. And when you pull the clutch in, it would disengage right away. Okay, we're in neutral. That didn't fly apart anyway. I pull the clutch in, which feels good. First gear sounded and felt good. Now let's take a look at the travel here on the clutch lever. Well, it's grabbing right away, right close in. That's really a good sign. It's like a new clutch. Okay, we'll wrap this up, and then I'll take it out and road test it. I hope the video has been a help and informative to someone that's new to this. It's a reminder that I am a beginner. This is the only one I've ever done. So any of you experienced mechanics out there, or more experienced than me, has any comments on what I should have done different, I certainly would